Hey, friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And welcome back to Going In Raw Matt Chat. You guys know how it works. We drag a guest kicking and screaming here to the channel so they can talk wrestling with us. And our guest this month is the gold standard in wrestling journalism. If you see a backstage report in wrestling, if his name ain't on it, it's probably a bunch of fake news. And he's also known for knowing way too much about wrestling, hence all his Quizlemania victories. Fightful's own Sean Ross Sapp. How you doing, Sean?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciated it.
Oh,
yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
So, for the people who might live under a rock, where can they find you?
We have Fightful.com. We cover pro wrestling, MMA, and some other combat stuff. If you just like wrestling, FightfulWrestling.com is the place to be. But we have a subscription service, FightfulSelect.com. We don't say Patreon because we're going to move that over to the site soon, but that's the most direct way you can support what we do. I mean, that's where I'm breaking news every single day. We've got backstage reports. We've got half a dozen podcasts over there. That's the best way to show your support in our pursuit of this wrestling news stuff that we do so much.
We, on our news brief every day, at least several times a week, they will hear us reiterate, Fightful Select, they're great, go subscribe.
And
this is the person that you'll be subscribing to right here. So make a good impression, Sean Ross.
Much appreciated.
Make us look good, Sean.
I gotta try at least.
All right, so this is how it works. The friendos out there on our Patreon at the $20 a month and up mark.
Should we start calling it Going In Raw something instead of our Patreon?
Going In Raw Select.
That's
going in.
Thing.
What's another sexual euphemism we can use for condomless sex? Can we figure something out?
Just add dog to the end of it.
Going in rawdog.com.
There you go. I guess so. Yeah.
Anyways, so all the friendos over there on the Patreon at $20 and up. If you want to send in your video question or your text question to our guest of the month, that's how you do it. We got a bunch of questions this month. Of course, Larson, who's starting us off today?
Christopher Rampersaw. Take it away, Christopher.
Hello, Steven, Larson, and Sean. So my question is about The Undertaker, obviously. This past Sunday, we saw him retired, 30 years. Thank you, Undertaker. Now my question is, are we going to see one more match with The Undertaker? We got to see one more match with The Undertaker, especially when we get fans back and everything. Will we see one more match by The Undertaker? And I hope it's a rematch against AJ. Let me know, guys.
Thank you, Christopher. All right, Sean, what do you say? Will we see one more Undertaker match?
I don't think that we're going to see one more Undertaker match. I do think that there's a possibility that we see him come out, throw a choke slam or tombstone. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are like, oh, well, that's not retired. I think it is. We see Steve Austin throw out stunners all the time. We see Mick Foley hit people with mandible claws and all that. They can still show up and do a thing or two. If we do see one more match, I want it to be a cinematic match with Sting. I can't believe they haven't done that. I can't believe they didn't do that. I was very surprised that The Undertaker didn't want to do more cinematic matches, which is something he said. Because I know when I asked Matt Hardy about this, he was like, man, I hope they get a few more years out of him because of that. Wow. Because he can be sort of that Richard or that Charles Bronson of WWE, that old man that just beats everybody up in cinematic form that you got to answer to. I think that was a really easy way to do it, but I think he's done in the ring. I think he's cooked.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that, barring some miracle fountain of youth thing that, some wrestlers have found over the years. I really doubt that's going to happen. The cinematic stuff, what sort of surprised me was just how open and okay he was with the Boneyard match being his last real match. He considered it a real thing. I know recently he says, they were dancing around my limitations, but in terms of presenting something that he considers a proper send-off for a match, he seemed totally at peace with Boneyard being that, the cinematic match being good enough, not having to be in front of, however many thousands of fans. Also, given that Vince McMahon himself came out and introduced Undertaker's final farewell, I got the feeling that was Vince being at peace with no longer being able to go to the Undertaker and saying, well, Mark, we need you again, Mark. we need you. And then Mark's like, God damn, I barely feel my hip. So yeah, I probably think he's done. I can see what you're saying though. Like, he might drop a tombstone or a choke slam or whatever. Larson, what do you think?
Everything seems to indicate that he's done. The fact that he's kind of let us all see who Mark Calloway is, break it down basically every level of kayfabe with the Undertaker, starting to tell all these wonderful stories he probably has up in that head of his. They could probably do another 10 episodes of Broken Skull Sessions, and they would not run out of things to talk about.
Oh, and they've been great. The first two were so good.
Fantastic. Yeah. That being said, he's always kind of, if Vince were to call him up and say, Mark, I need you, he would be fine and picking up that call and talking to about it. And if Vince was at a tight spot and, he has this thing in his office, I think, and it says, in case of emergency, break glass, call Undertaker. That if Vince was in a real pinch, he would probably call up old Mark and try to get him to come back for one more match. And maybe, I think I'd be really surprised if he would do it. But if Vince put enough zeros at the end of that check, if the situation was right, if the opponent was right, and he was in any way inclined to maybe come back, maybe he would consider it. I would be really surprised at this point, considering everything they've done leading up to his announcement at Survivor Series. This all feels very final. But this is also pro wrestling.
Yeah,
How many times has Terry Funk retired?
Yeah,
How many times has Ric Flair retired?
Yeah.
So do I expect him to have another match? No. Would I be surprised if he did? Yes. But if he does, I'm not going to be completely flabbergasted by it.
There you go. Next up, the Hall of Famer Christian has a question about Undertaker like gimmicks. Let's see what Christian has to say.
What is up, Steve and Larson and special guest? This is the Hall of Famer Christian returning to Matt Chat. My question this week is regarding the Undertaker and his retirement at Survivor Series last night. And this question is about what he represents as far as horror gimmicks in the wrestling. Everybody calls this era the reality era. The kayfabe has never been pulled back more than it has been these days. Will we, do gimmicks like Taker's still work the same way? Yes, we have the Fiend, but we all know it's just Bray behind the mask. Does it work? Too sweet, hearty handshake.
Thank you, Christian, for your question about The Undertaker and gimmicks like his. So, I think the most obvious sort of Undertaker-esque gimmick, I guess we could just sort of talk about supernatural gimmicks. You got The Fiend, which is like one of the most successful characters in the modern age, quite clearly. You've got other stuff like, Demon Balor, who sort of flirted with some supernatural stuff before they just sort of said, screw it, you're back to being, sort of diet Prince Devitt in NXT. So I think they can work. I think they can work better now than maybe in the past because, like, production value is a lot better when WWE has the resources to reach out to people like Tom Savini, or, they have like a better, because so much of it is in the presentation. I think that the gimmick, I think those kind of things can probably work better these days, as long as the person that is inhabiting the role is solid. Because, that's why The Undertaker really worked, is because you had a guy in the role who knew how to approach it, and it wasn't too goofy of a thing. Like, The Undertaker is just, it's a cool idea. Like, the concept or the images surrounding death are generally kind of cool. So that's like why it worked, and Mark Calloway like knew how to do that stuff really well. So I think that, I think that they still work as long as they're like few and far between. What's kind of surprising to me is that like Vince didn't really, if you look back on history, were there a ton of, Sean, you probably know this better than anybody because of your like vast freakish wrestling knowledge. After the success of The Undertaker, like I went back and tried to do a little bit. Were there a ton of like knockoffs? Because we know like with Hogan, Vince always loved big jack dudes, right? And so you see a lot of those, but it's not like he went all in on trying to do a ton of supernatural stuff after The Undertaker.
Yeah, they flirted with it, like the magician that they had come in for one day, and then he set backstage on fire, and they're like, you got to get out of here. Fantasio, was that him? Yeah, he almost set Bruce Pritchard on fire.
I have no knowledge of that.
Oh,
Fantasio?
Fantasio. He was there for like a couple matches. He did some magic stuff, and they're like, hit the bricks. Of course, the Papa Shango thing, they tried that, and
Sure.
and it didn't. I mean, it didn't work for long, but it worked pretty well. People still remember it. They had Kane and all that stuff. They had elements of it, but they never went full bore. They tried with Mordecai, and they were going to go full on with Mordecai, but as it turned out, Mordecai had knocked some dude out at a bar a few months before and was about to get sued. So that's why that was a wrap. So they have tried. They've tried to have, and all these people are always associated with Undertaker too, because of those elements.
I mean, they had Gangrel also, like in the Attitude Era. Like they've tried, but I'm kind of surprised that there hadn't been like more attempts given how well the Undertaker went over. But I guess over the years, you can point to like, I don't know, a couple. So I don't know, like, could they still work today? Yeah, if presented properly and if the production is there, you could see that with the Fiend. I just think that, it's probably not the smartest move in the world to have too many of them. But I think they could work better today than they probably would have in the past, just because of production value. So
production value, and then you got it's you get the quality performer that could provide the mystique of whether it's directly supernatural or inferred. You mentioned the Fiend, Bray Wyatt. Obviously, there's supernatural elements, tons of mystique around the Fiend. Even like Aleister Black in NXT. That dude was all mystique, and in a lot of ways, he seemed like the heir apparent to assuming that mantle the Undertaker may have had on the main roster. Yeah, that's gone. And then over to AEW, you got Abaddon, who's like dripping blood everywhere.
Abaddon's great.
Licking belts. It's pretty great, and they're all to various degrees supernatural or horror themed gimmicks, and at least apart from Aleister now. Those three examples are still seem pretty darn effective.
Sean, what do you say? Do you think it could still work today?
Oh, yeah. I think the beauty of the horror genre, especially, is that it's often low cost, high reward. I mean, there aren't a ton of like major, huge budget horror movies, but man, you get some of the best returns on that. The unfortunate aspect is they have somebody perfect like Bray Wyatt and the Wyatt family. My favorite horror movies are the ones that I conceivably believe could happen to me. And I live in Kentucky. There's a Wyatt family on every block down here. Like you believe that, hey, you make a wrong turn in the woods, those guys might come after you. They don't necessarily have to shoot lightning or anything like that, but just they know their surroundings, they know their area. The unfortunate aspect of WWE is it's never enough for them. So they take Bray Wyatt from a horror movie character, and we're talking pre-Fiend. I consider the original creepy Waylon Mercy-esque character as one of the best of his. And they turn him into a middle schooler who likes AV class. They're like, all right, well, I'm going to turn out the lights on you. I'm going to put some worms on the ring.
Yeah, that was a low point.
They do that, and they lack any sense with some of the Fiend stuff because people want to like that. Every time he does his honest to God entrance, I'm like, oh yeah, that's why he's so cool. And I think they've done pretty well with Firefly Funhouse specifically. I think that's how you do it. You apply it to things that could conceivably happen to you. Dexter Lumis, Sam Shaw does it really well as like, has he murdered somebody? Or can they prove it? I don't know. There are ways to do that, and I think you have to play off of the realities of the world.
Hey, let me ask you something now that we're on the subject, because Larson and I have talked about this quite a bit on our NXT recaps, but I want to get your thoughts on it. Dexter Lumis's ceiling. What do you think it is? How the hell do you approach a guy who clearly is supposed to be a serial killer? It seems like even NXT, which I think is like some of the best creative there is, even NXT can't really figure out how to handle it because it always seems to dive into like comedy, like we're getting right now with Cameron Grimes.
I don't know how you would go at that. I mean, in TNA, they very clearly made him a serial killer, like with no room to do anything else. Like it depends on how far you want to play into it. I could see him being like a counter serial killer type of guy. Like he's a vigilante that takes care of people before they do the terrible thing. Like he's always got his ear to the ground, and that his multi-talented nature with him being so good at art and stuff really lends a lot to that. and he's worked real hard. I mean, I was talking to people. We do a series on Fightful Select called Brass Ring, where I talk to a bunch of wrestlers and I say, who's been working hard to improve? Who does this? Who does that? Dexter Lumis was brought up by a bunch of people in NXT.
Yeah.
And there were several people that were like, this guy was off TV for 5 years. He could have given up. He was like, there are a lot of people that get fired from WWE and they never wrestle again. He was off TV for 5 years and refined his gimmick and took it to NXT. So if he's willing to do that, I think that the ceiling is kind of high. I don't think he'll be NXT champion or anything, but I think that he can be. I think that we'll probably have a really terrible program with him and the Fiend in the future.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to, I wonder if sort of we got this a couple of weeks ago with, and we're completely off topic here, but that's okay. It's our show. We got this a couple of weeks ago and it failed spectacularly. The Lars Sullivan interviews.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yes.
I think you would note, or somebody had noted on Twitter, that if this was them trying to replicate the Mankind interview, which was so great back in the day, they failed spectacularly. I wonder if they could pull off something like that, because I think the one thing that he's lacking is a little bit of like some amount of relatability, like let him in. If you nail an interview like that, like the Mankind one with Dexter Lumis, I think that could go a long way towards, okay, I get it now. It's not just this one-dimensional, carbon copy horror movie guy, because he's got his in-ring style is so much fun. His character work, he is so invested in it. Obviously, he's got everything. He just needs that one thing that people can hold on to give a damn about him.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there are ways to approach that. Like you have somebody interviewing him backstage and they're like, you creep a lot of people out. And he can be like, a lot of you creep me out. And then he points to the fact, like, what was Cameron Grimes doing in my house? Like, what was he about to do in the shower? Like, what? Well, he's the creepy one, like, and him to do it in a really matter-of-fact manner, but him to kind of point out, like, I'm the normal one here. I think there are ways that you can.
Yeah.
That could be cool.
There's a way that you can explore his side of his personality and relate to his story. The issue with WWE is, and we see it with Lumis and we see it with Shotzi, that becomes them. That's all they are, is that.
Yeah.
He's a serial killer, maybe. Shotzi likes tanks and wears a funny hat. Okay.
Yeah.
Or even worse with it, like Angel Garza, who like had all the upside, and then all of a sudden now he's doing these weird, like trying to bang the camera person kind of stuff. Yeah. Bob Roode is the worst example of that.
Song,
Yeah, he is literally just the glorious theme song, or at least he was. Or maybe that'll change.
We don't even get to hear it anymore.
Nope.
I'm sure he's probably happy about that. Let's see here. Church Jackson is up next with a question about a new Firefly Funhouse match. Let's see what he has to say.
Hi guys, it's Church Jackson here, along with my dog Punk. We would like to ask Steve, Larson, and Sean what they would like to see in a Randy Orton, Bray Wyatt, Firefly Funhouse match. That's about it. Too sweet, hearty handshake. Too good. Thanks for all your work, Sean. Bye.
All right, thank you, Church. Larson,
Thank you, Church.
What do you want to see? Bray versus
Well,
Orton? Firefly
if
Funhouse.
we learned anything from the previous Firefly Funhouse is that match is that Bray will plumb his opponent's past to pull some interesting story beats, some character development. With Randy Orton, there's a lot of opportunities to do some, shall we say, interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Randy Orton, if any of the backstage stories are to be believed, has conducted himself in an interesting manner, especially more so the early part of his career. So you can make allusions to handshakes.
Yeah.
To putting stuff in people's luggage.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. Maybe pulling rank backstage to maybe get someone released from the company. You know, whether any of those stories are true or not, you reference them. And then people like us will say, oh, they referenced that. That's pretty neat. So that's what I would expect. Now, I mean, I don't know Orton, how cool he would be directly referencing some of that stuff.
He's talked about that stuff in his promos.
Some of it he has,
Yeah.
You know, he's talked about, getting himself in trouble and relying on people to get him out of trouble. But I don't know how, directly he wants certain things referenced.
Well,
I don't know.
What was it? What feud did he have? Oh, Edge. Didn't Edge like tangentially bring up the duffel bag rumor? Somebody,
remember that.
I thought somebody on Raw. Somebody brought up the term luggage.
It was Drew. I thought it was.
Was it Drew? Okay,
I think it was
okay.
Drew. Yeah.
When Drew first started talking about, back when I first started and you did this, and I thought
He said something about baggage or something like that.
Baggage or luggage or something like that.
Yeah.
And he punctuated it, and I was like, did he just reference the duffel bag thing? Anyways, so yeah, let's see who's Sean. Yeah, Sean, you're up. What do you want to see in a Firefly Funhouse with Randy Orton?
So obviously you got to cover the backstage stuff, but you also, if you're doing the Firefly Funhouse, have to bring up some deep cuts from his on-screen career. They're going to do RNN, the Randy News Network, from his shoulder injury. If you remember those updates, they'll go with that deep cut. Wouldn't be shocked if they brought in a Ted DiBiase Jr. or somebody like that, or Manu, even, for the love of God. Throw Manu some work. Reference Legacy and Evolution. Jindrak would be fun because everybody knows about that. And as we've seen on Talking Shop Mania 2, he played Triple H. He's not above doing that. Like he'll do that. I think there are some things there that would be really fun. And Firefly Funhouse rewards you for being a longtime wrestling fan, because there's going to be a lot of stuff that a bunch of people don't get, and that's the target audience for that. I really enjoy it.
I think one thing, given that like everybody has panned their WrestleMania match, like the stuff with the worms.
Oh gosh,
that really needs to be like, if there's one. I mean, Bray did that so perfectly with Cena in the Firefly Funhouse, bringing up their Mania match and how he thinks it should have been booked, which is like, it was obvious, it was plain as day. Cena needed to compromise his own principles in order to win the match. That's how it should have gone down, and it didn't happen. And so Bray brought that up, and he tried to like say, hey, this is what it should have been. That match also obviously needs to be brought up. I say, and you sort of mentioned it already with Talk Shop Mania, bring in, how about you do this? You have Randy Orton sort of experience some of the stuff, but you use his brother to play him at the same time, because that stuff was amazing. What was his name? Nathan? I think is it Nathan Orton? Yeah. Him doing that when he gets up to the thing and he just goes, instead of doing the full on. I thought that was absolutely great stuff. So bring in his brother, who's like a dead ringer for just like a really smaller, shrunken version of him. The Jindrak idea is a really great one.
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, there's all sorts of great stuff you can reference on the screen. Make it different than the Cena stuff, but still you can, like you said, you can really reach down in the history of Randy Orton on and off screen to get a lot of great stuff there. Next up, we got Patrick Sparks, the B-Man. He's going back in time and talking about WCW. Let's see what he has to say.
Hey, friendos, Pat here. So, we know that WWE beat WCW in the Monday Night Wars. They bought them. They ended them. They did the invasion. They did all that. WWE had some iconic moments during the Attitude Era. And without some of them, and there's a chance that they may not have beaten the ratings. The ones that come to mind for me are obviously This Is Your Life with Rock and Foley, Tyson and Austin, and I'll even put Tyson's Beer Truck. If those didn't happen, amongst other things that happened in the Attitude Era, if the big iconic moments that we all remember didn't happen, do you think that WCW would have lasted longer than 2001 if it wasn't for the shitty booking? Thanks, friendos.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Sean, what do you say?
you,
WCW, any chance it could have lasted longer?
I mean, yeah, there's a chance it could have lasted longer, but at that point, wrestling was headed towards a different direction. I think wrestling fans craved better in-ring work, and they had some of that, but I mean at like the top of the card. The pace had changed by that point. Rock and Austin, even Triple H, Foley, Undertaker was stepping up his pace, and then you had Hogan doing what he did. You didn't see a lot of fast-paced Jeff Jarrett matches back then either, or Kevin Nash or anything like that. All due respect to them. I like both of those guys, but a lot was changing in that regard, and WCW still had some contracts on the books for a long time. The slow burn, it seemed like it went out the door after Goldberg won the title. After that, they're like, all right, time to hot shot everything. So, I mean, I think it would have lasted longer. I don't think it would have lasted much longer. And but if there weren't a lot of iconic WWE Attitude Era moments, maybe Russo doesn't jump over. What does that do? Who knows?
Yeah, I think that like it's funny because like I read the Guy Evans Nitro book.
Great book.
Oh, it's fantastic. It really is. The number of times that WCW shot themselves in the foot. From the Hogan contract, like the Hogan contract in '98, I think it was such a mess. And it literally, like from a creative standpoint, it killed WCW in so many respects. Like they couldn't use their biggest asset, Hulk Hogan, in a way that actually could have helped the company. Obviously, it simply helped Hulk Hogan. And it's funny to me because I would have thought that at that point, especially in '98, WCW would have had a lot more leverage than, because what else was he going to do? I mean, he could have just retired, or he could have gone. I mean, I don't think Vince would have taken him back at that point because he was so ill-fitting for what they were doing in WWE. That contract was ridiculous, but it was like one thing out of so many other things. Now, if WWE had not been able to adapt, if they had remained in that sort of 1995, 1996 mode and didn't figure out, hey, we need to do attitude stuff, I think like you might have a much different story. But like you said, without Russo coming over, because like a lot of the Russo ideas were just so bad that shot them in the foot as well. And then of course you've got like the behind the scenes, you know, all the network stuff with the AOL merger and stuff like that going on. So who knows? But if WWE, if Vince never was able to adapt, and if he had never turned, you know, if The Rock had never joined the Nation, he was just Rocky Maivia, and he tried to ram that down our throats. If he never figured out with Stone Cold, if none of those guys would have like come alive, and all those great story ideas never would have happened, then maybe at that point you would have seen WCW. I mean, I guess there's a possibility if Russo didn't come over, if they had stayed the course a bit more. I mean, I guess history would have been too changed at that point to really say for sure what would have happened. Yeah. But I mean, you know, Vince did figure it out, and we got what we got. Mm-hmm. Larson, what do you think about all that?
I mean, I think you guys hit pretty much all the beats. I'm in agreement. I guess the one thing would be if Vince hadn't made those adjustments, WCW, you know, at the time of the acquisition, if they were going strong, if they were still winning on a regular basis in the ratings war, if they maybe weren't hemorrhaging money like they were, maybe AOL would not have been so, this is all speculation, of course, been so amped to get out of the wrestling business. I guess who knows what could have happened then. But, you know, I think it comes down to it. At that juncture, they were kind of run so damn poorly that the writing was kind of on the wall.
Yeah.
Could they maybe lasted a few more months? Maybe.
One thing that was kind of interesting too, and this is something that like it predated that we all sort of knew it. You could see it happening on screen. Was I wonder if there was such a weird situation with WWE. Everything was Vince. Like the guys wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, you know, people would act up. Like you have the clique politicking a lot in WWE. You have Shawn Michaels basically sort of doing what he wanted to back then, and Vince could only do so much to sort of rein him in. With WCW, it was so easy for guys to check out. Like Nash and Hall came in and they were all in on the NWO idea, and they were like, yeah, let's do this. As soon as anybody tried to discipline them, like X-Pac, you know, they fire X-Pac. They're like, hey, you know, this is done. They checked out. They were we got these huge fat contracts. You can't do anything. They're ironclad. And creatively, they just checked out. They didn't care anymore. Like Nash got the book and he tried to do what he could do, but like it just felt like everybody there at a certain level were just into it for themselves. And I don't know how that culture could have ever changed unless like Ted Turner himself was the guy showing up at gorilla position, checking these people.
He goes backstage on Teddy Jr., huh? Starts trying to rally the troops, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how that culture ever could have changed over there.
Yeah, who knows?
It was too far gone at that point. I mean, we've seen and heard so many stories, and I mean, even the infamous story where Kevin Nash will talk about how they got their contracts up on deal memos because WCW thought that the fake Razor and Diesel were really going, like things like that. Like there were some questionable calls, which I know Bischoff has disputed that in the past, but once you realize that you can kind of pull the wool over somebody's eyes, or they can pull it over their own eyes, man, that, like you said, that culture was there.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of things would have had to have been different in WCW for history to have changed, I think.
Oh yeah.
Let's see here. We got a question from Dirty Rich about basketball. What does he have to say? Let's see Dirty Rich here.
I'm steering away from the holiday questions because everyone's going to ask them. But as you can see, I was playing some ball in my own living room today, and I wondered who could Steven Larson beat wrestling-wise in a 2-on-2? So there's the question, but it has to be at least a man of average height.
Thank you, Dirty Rich. Interesting question here from Dirty Rich. All right, so we'll start off with this. Larson, I'm pretty sure you and I could probably ball up the team of Goldberg and The Undertaker.
I mean, now, yeah, but Undertaker, he played college ball. He might still have some skills. He might not be able to move that great, but man, you put the ball in his hand.
I think I'd look like Allen Iverson to The Undertaker.
I don't know, man. He's still got height on his side. I don't know. He's still probably fundamentally sound all these years later. This is what I got.
Yeah.
This is what I got. Any two members of the Undisputed Era, they're all about our height. They conditioning wise, they got the advantage, but I don't know if they even play basketball.
The Undisputed Era, those guys are athletes.
Yeah.
They're like really good. Are you kidding? What? I throw to you two 60-year-olds and you come at me with the Undisputed. We can't be.
Yeah,
maybe Bobby Fish.
You're dismissing that. You're dismissing that because you got to meet them and I didn't get to go on that trip. I feel left out.
Well, that's still not a good reason to answer. That was terrible. All right, that's a terrible answer. Sean, you're the tallest man in the wrestling news media.
In wrestling media, by far, yes.
That's well known. You versus what's AJ Styles' manager? What do they call him now? Also
Jordan. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he's beaten me. He played ball. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he's like super tall.
But I mean, okay. Am I talking about you two, or am I getting involved here? So we're talking like all three of us. Nia Jax and Hornswoggle for sure.
Oh wow.
I mean, Nia Jax, she's not necessarily I don't think she's played basketball. She's got rough knees. Hornswoggle, height advantage. But you know what? I'll throw one in that most people might not think. Chris Sabin, because he has had knee issues in the past.
Ooh.
So might be a little bit cognizant of that. I'll throw Tegan Knox in there as well. I've got no mercy.
Man,
she's on the shelf with knee surgery right now.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm picking people that I could beat.
Just
Sean
ACL's blowing up.
Cross people over.
Oh my God, knees blowing up everywhere on the court here. We're going in Raw and Fightful team. Wow, going in Fightful and Raw, whatever it's called.
Well, next time we have
the Undisputed, we would get annihilated.
It's not a good answer right now. Let's just try to do something funny.
Those kids can ball. I guarantee those kids.
I don't know about that.
They're shorter. They're shorter than all of us, but I guarantee you they can ball.
Some good zone defense. We'll be fine. Next time there's a basketball game happening for StarCast. We'll have to get in on that, Steve. If it's going to happen again, Sean.
Oh, absolutely, man. Absolutely. That was a lot of fun.
My jumper is broke right now, but I'll play anyways.
Oh, that won't stop you from shooting. Next up, TNA for Life has a question. I like this one. This is a good one. Let's see what he has to say.
What wrestler has a voice that just doesn't match the way they look or the way they act? I know this is probably a pretty silly question, but I want to know. Thank you so much. Too sweet. Hearty handshake. Peace out.
All right, thank you, TNA for Life. Larson, kick us off. What wrestler has a voice that doesn't match his appearance?
I mean, isn't it just Brock Lesnar? I mean, he's massive.
That's a good one.
He's huge.
Yeah.
He looks like he should talk like Braun Strowman.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't.
Yeah, it's a bit of a higher.
I mean,
yeah.
it doesn't mean he's not any less scary, but
yeah,
you know, you hear him talking, you don't expect that voice to come out of that person.
Sean, what do you say?
Low key. Low key. He's a small dude.
Hey.
But yeah, he's got that booming voice. That's
Don't tell me not to wear a mask. I'll wear a mask if I want to wear a mask.
We sarcastically paid David Bixenspan to watch a webinar from him one time.
I remember that.
There were only 3 people on the webinar. David, a well-known troll on the internet, not David. David's not the troll. Another troll named Oatgan, and then a plant that low-key very clearly had in there to supply questions and sent him to talking points. That was it.
What I remember some of that. Did Bixenspan like write it up or something? Like, wasn't
yes, he did. Yes, he did. Check it out on Fightful.com. Just type in low-key webinar. Oh, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
Oh, man. Oh, that's classic. I'm going to go with Dexter Lumis. So like in our somebody before the cameo purge, some of the friendos got together, and I think he was like pretty cheap, and they got a really terrific Dexter Lumis intro for us. And I had never seen his work in TNA. I'd never seen his stuff before. And he does this really creepy intro for us. And I took the Undisputed Era intro that I had for us. And it was when they were feuding. And I sort of like, I do the same thing, but then I cut him into it. And it's like, you think that it's going to be more like Damian Priest or something like that. And it's a bit of a higher register. He's still creepy. Yeah. But yeah, Dexter, for me, I was kind of surprised at Dexter Lumis' voice.
I think in MMA, a lot of people wouldn't expect Anderson Silva to have such a high-pitched voice.
Yeah, totally.
Very high-pitched voice. And in wrestling, another one, a lot of people don't expect Jessamine Duke to have the Kentucky accent when she talks. But it's like super, super thick.
God, I don't even remember hearing her talk at all.
Yeah.
She has such a great look. Like, she looks so legit as a fighter. Shame WWE doesn't do more with her.
She's doing the up, down, down stuff now.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
She's helping run that now.
Oh, that's like a thing for her now, is it?
Oh, yeah. Like her, Mia Yim, Dakota Kai, Shayna Baszler. I assume it's because of the G4 stuff with Xavier that they announced them as co-commissioners of up, down, down, and they're all going to be producing content now.
Oh, that's cool. Fantastic. That's really cool. That's good. Also really cool. Joshua Martinez. Is this a video or a text question?
This is a text question. These last 2 are text questions.
All right. So Josh Martinez, J-Mart, he was responsible for helping me get my PS5. Shout out to J-Mart.
Wow.
The Friendo community is really great. Who else gets I start publicly griping about not being able to get a PS5 because I'm an idiot and didn't pre-order, and Dad down there gives me all sorts of shit. And what happens? J-Mart comes through, one of the amazing Going In Raw mods, and says, Hey, I got one in my cart right now from Sony Direct. Do you want it? Yeah, I want it. Look at that shit. Oh, it's great. I've been playing COD Zombies and everything. Anyways, Josh Martinez says this. He says, what do you think is going to have the biggest impact on WWE in terms of COVID? No fans at shows until who knows when, or no more house shows for the foreseeable future. He also wants to give a quick shout out to Sean Ross Sapp. He saw a couple months ago, he said he grew out his hair for charity. So Josh has started to do the same thing.
Awesome. Thank you. I mean, that was the point of us doing it, and us doing it with AEW, doing the haircut there. I wanted to get more people to donate their hair, make some people feel a bit better about themselves. So big thank you for doing that. I really appreciate that. It meant a lot to me when we did that. It means a lot that you're doing it. But I think that there are definitely unique impacts to both. Wrestling shows are not the same without fans. They are not the same without fans. The ambient audio can be whatever it's going to be, but the Thunderdome has run its course too. We know that audio ain't coming from the Thunderdome. The video doesn't match up. It's just a bunch of faces back there. The house show thing, okay, so that will affect a lot. That's going to affect money. That's going to affect schedule. AEW wasn't running house shows, so there were a lot of people that were leaning towards that schedule when contract time came. I think that fans, though, is the biggest difference because I think that has an impact on viewership significantly. That has a major impact on moments. Imagine the reaction when Roman Reigns came back. Imagine the reaction when Drew McIntyre beat Brock Lesnar. Imagine when Bayley turned on Sasha Banks. Those are moments that we will never get an appropriate reaction out of, and that's unfortunate.
There's been some really cool moments this year and you're absolutely right. And the funny thing is, like, for me, I see there are the big moments, but then there are certain matches because several wrestlers this year have really stepped up. And sometimes it feels like, well, not sometimes, obviously the people backstage are paying attention. One of the best sort of, tests to see what's getting over and what isn't, what wrestlers are really making an impact, so to speak, is crowd reaction. And so even in your normal match, for example, Matt Riddle and Sheamus have had two of my favorite matches on regular TV this year. For some reason, those dudes have chemistry, and I never saw that coming.
Yeah.
And I think those kinds of moments really are being hurt by the lack of fans. Like, everybody knows, like everything you just said, the WrestleMania moments, the big moments, those need fans. They really do, for the legacy stuff. But for the guys and girls who are really killing themselves and busting their asses to not have the benefit of those fans to help get them even more noticed by the people who make decisions backstage, I think that is probably going to be a really disappointing thing for them in this era. House shows, I sort of got the feeling that pre-pandemic house shows seemed to be on sketchy ground anyways. So
they were scaling that back significantly.
Yeah. So that's really not shocking, but yeah, I agree with you. I hope that, once things are safe, fans, the presence of fans will really help wrestling come back to, it'll have like a pretty big rebound.
Yeah, you hope so. I guess the house show aspect of it, even if it was kind of heading this way to begin with pre-pandemic, as far as WB phasing out, 3-4 house shows a week, and obviously the attendance was in decline on those anyways. But in a year's time, when things are returning to some semblance of normalcy, if they scale back the house show schedule, maybe do 1 or 2 a week, how is that going to affect them building an audience for the future? A lot of times that's the only wrestling shows people can go to that's near them, because they'll hit a lot of smaller cities or towns and whatnot with house shows versus TVs. Maybe people or families won't want to drive 2-3 hours to go to a Raw or SmackDown when they could have maybe gone to a house show. So, and I understand, WWE's got this huge online presence, 2 huge TV deals. There's no shortage of avenues by which to ingest WWE content. But if they're only running 3 shows a week, and the closest one of those shows is once a year, 3 hours from you, are you going to fork over the money to do it plus drive all the way and back? That could potentially, I don't know if it will, but potentially have an impact on future growth of their audience.
I wonder if they've done, Sean, you might know maybe an answer to this, if they've done any studies in advance of scaling back their house show schedule.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That they were doing that already, and that was a big reason why. A lot of those are break-even shows, and it was basically to get some eyes on stuff. And break-even means, well, they're breaking even, but they're also giving a little bit more money to their wrestlers in that regard as well. I do have to say, there are some ways that no fans have, I think, improved WWE, and it shouldn't have taken that, but we're seeing less promo tropes. Like, we don't see the all you people promos anymore, because there are no people to all you anymore. We're not seeing the Alexa Bliss promo they did 1,000,000 times, where she went out there and feigned sincerity and then said, "I'm sorry that I didn't do it sooner." All that stuff. We're not seeing what chance. For the love of God, we are not seeing what chance
those are
anymore.
Gonna come back, man. You're
Yeah,
right,
they'll come
but
back.
those
That's
are
CM
so
Punk.
gonna. Yeah.
I do not miss those whatsoever. And I do think that we are seeing significantly better promo work because we're seeing a lot of these people speak directly to a camera, to us at home. We're seeing them do that instead of relying on that generic stuff. If you guys remember, right after the Becky Lynch explosion at SummerSlam a few years ago, they tried to all you people her. That week, they tried to do it. And then everybody was like, no, this is not what we want. This is not it. So now that they can't do that, you're seeing a lot of the creativity in promos. You're seeing guys like MVP. They're leaning on him heavily because he can talk. And I think that is a benefit. I just hope that that carries on with fans and they don't get scared by what.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying of late. They did it on the Roman Drew contract signing. Well, they'll have segments in the ring, but not have the wrestlers hold mics.
Yes.
It makes the scene much more intimate, much more natural, much more genuine. They've done it a couple times. But that particular segment has really put a spotlight on how good and effective that approach can be versus, two guys just sitting there with mics, especially when they're talking to nobody, you know.
One thing I'm really curious about in terms of all the promotions, I want to see what Impact is going to look like with fans back. I feel like they've had the most steady, sort of consistent, creatively decent 2020 in terms of their stability. And I'm really curious to know what it's going to be like when they get fans back, like what kind of, organic sort of buzz they can draw from that. Because it's not the easiest thing to watch right now because it's so empty. Like, it's one thing, at least Thunderdome, I've actually not minded Thunderdome because it, just from a production standpoint, I can kind of suspend my disbelief that, it's not just a bunch of, silent people doing this or this. I think the thing that really broke it for me was the Undertaker's final farewell, where they piped in the thank you Taker, and there's not even faces in the crowd.
No.
That, to me, was, a bit much. But Impact, I think, has been doing some interesting stuff that really, I'm really curious if they can. They seem to have shed completely the old sort of the negative connotation that TNA had back in the day, and they really have a lot of great talent there. I really want to see fans at Impact and see if they really start, glomming onto Impact as their thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been enjoying Impact consistently. They have some really ridiculous stuff too.
It's fun though. It's fun.
It is fun.
Yeah. They're not afraid. They're not afraid to be goofy, and I love that.
I loved the coat rack with the IV on it for the Johnny Bravo thing.
Yeah.
It was just so ridiculous.
We have one final text question here from Luisa Reza. He says, in a parallel universe, WWE is holding an actual World Cup in collaboration with every company on the planet. Your mission is to put together a dream team of 7 living wrestlers for the following countries/regions. He actually only gives us 6 here. U.S.
I think it's 7 people per region.
Oh, I'm not doing that. I did one per. I'm doing one per. U.S., Canada, Europe, Mexico, Japan, and the Pacific Islands. What countries make it to the finals? And who goes over? Who's going? I'm going first. Okay. Yeah. I've got in the U.S., the current United States champion, Bobby Lashley. For Canada, the cleaner, Kenny Omega. From Europe, of course, Walter. From the Pacific Islands, Roman Reigns. From Mexico, Pentagon Jr. And from Japan, of course, Kazuchika Okada.
All right. Who's your finals? Who goes over?
Okada. Okada always wins.
That's true.
The final is Okada versus Walter.
There you go.
I like that.
For the U.S., I'll go with Daniel Bryan.
Good.
Canada, I'll try not to repeat your answers. For Canada, I'll go with Kevin Owens.
Oh, good.
For Europe, I'll go with Drew McIntyre.
Ooh, nice.
Mexico, Dr. Wagner Jr.
Oh, great pick.
I can't go Okada for Japan, so I'll go Minoru Suzuki.
Ooh, nice.
And then for Pacific Islands, I'll go... Part of me wants to say Haku, but I'll go Jacob Fatu.
Great answer.
My finals will be Dr. Wagner Jr. versus Minoru Suzuki. Minoru Suzuki goes over.
Oh, I like that. Sean, what do you got?
Oh, for the sake of switching it up, I'll go Moxley, U.S., But that is just for the sake of switching it up. Normally, I would probably pick somebody else. Canada, I think Jericho would be a fun one if we're not doing Omega. Just again, if we're not doing Omega. Roman Reigns getting snubbed out of the Pacific Islands in favor of a returning Rock would be very interesting for the World Cup.
Oh,
the
yeah.
World
The
Cup.
World Cup.
The World Cup would be very interesting. Mexico, I'd probably go Rey Fenix just because I think that I think he's just the most fun person to watch in the world. See, Europe, I was going to go Drew McIntyre as well. So, again, for the sake of changing that up, I'll go Tyler Bate because he's completely different than absolutely everything else in there, except for Phoenix. And again, I've got the 3rd round draft picks here.
Yeah, we really should have done this like in sequence, but whatever.
That's okay. It's okay. Larson, who'd you have for Japan?
Minoru Suzuki.
Okay, I got Kota Ibushi then.
Oh yeah,
I got Kota Ibushi there. And who's going over? I'll probably go Moxley there just because Rock ain't working a bunch of matches. He'll do one. He'll put somebody over. He'll give him the nod, hand slap, cool high five in the ring. You did great, brother, type of thing. And yeah, 3rd round draft picks here.
All right, I'm going to put you guys on the spot.
All right.
Let's do the worst. The worst.
Tamina, Pacific Islands.
So here's my picks to give you guys some time to think. All right. So from Japan, I've got Yoshihashi.
Yep, there you go.
From Mexico, I've got Nino Hamburguesa, that big guy who his name is Nino Hamburger, from AAA. From the Pacific Islands, I'm going to go with Jimmy Uso because this guy is totally the odd man out in one of the best stories of the year. In Europe, I'm going to go with Jack Stars, the resident NXT UK jobber.
Good.
In Canada, I'm going to bring Val Venus out of retirement.
Oh, God.
Ooh.
And from the U.S., we're going to go with Stang from Talking Shopomania. Heath Slater. I'm going to go with Stang. So you guys are up. I don't care.
All right. All right, give me a minute here. Man, Jack Stars is good for Europe. That's tough to follow. Shit. Well, if you got someone in mind, Sean, go ahead.
Mexico, one of the Villanos. After I saw that Triple Mania match a few years ago, worst match I've ever seen in my life. Whatever Villano they can drag out there. Here's the thing. I'm not saying that Tamina is the worst Pacific Island wrestler, but she only shows up for matches with stakes. She is only there for top contender matches, title matches. She'd find her way into this tournament. She would find a way, even if it's not intergender.
Right.
She would find a way.
Right.
Man, US. Oh, there's so many terrible wrestlers here. There are a lot of really bad ones. Man, let me think. That's a tough one. That's a tough one too, because usually if people are on American TV, they're usually not terrible.
Yeah, the talent pool is insane these days. It's really really spectacular.
Meanwhile, like 20 years ago, we would just be reeling off names like, oh, Brockus, there's one, and like all kinds of people in WCW were just horrible.
Steve, remember the name of that guy in AAA that took that powerbomb and bounced his head off the table?
Yeah, it was oh god damn it.
It's on the tip of my tongue too. I can't remember who it was.
Was it Superfly?
Yeah, sounds right.
That was the worst spot I've ever seen in like modern pro wrestling. It was so bad.
All right. Gosh, it was so bad.
I was trying to go with all Sting lookalikes, so I was going to have Chessman in there.
Oh gosh!
But then I had Stang, and I couldn't really think of any other Sting lookalikes.
NWO Sting wrestled a match about a year ago.
Oh really?
Jeff Farmer did?
Yeah.
Huh.
I interviewed him at WrestleCade. Honestly, legit, most starstruck I ever was to do an interview because I was like, "Will he even want to talk about wrestling?" Because he made his career pretending to be somebody else, and he was so nice and jacked. He's in better shape than real Sting now. Dude,
going to Starcast, what is it called? Yeah, Starcast. So many of those wrestlers stay in great shape. I was shocked because I hadn't seen Shamrock. Like, he hadn't done the Impact stuff.
Oh,
again yet.
gosh.
He was in amazing shape.
Yes, he is.
Still is, obviously. But, like, when I saw him, it was the first time in forever. He was in great shape.
Yeah.
Man, the worst is so hard because, like, I don't see a lot of just really terrible matches on TV these days.
Oh, no. Here's it. Well, okay, we'll just stick to in kayfabe then. What about Johnny Swinger? Put him in there.
He's so funny.
I love him. I love him so much. He is so damn funny. He is so damn funny.
Yeah, if we're doing kayfabe, Lana's in there because she's just her gimmick is that she is a bad wrestler.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I was actually supposed to, or I pitched to wrestle Barry Horowitz earlier this year.
Really?
On my show.
Wow.
Yeah, to get out of wrestling the person I was going to wrestle.
Who are you going to wrestle? Or can you say?
The promoter. The overweight promoter with health problems. We were going to do like a comedy match, but I was afraid that he was actually going to die in the match. And I was like, I can make it good. I can make it look good, but I can't promise you that you're going to be alive. Not because I was going to like beat him up or anything, but because I wasn't sure. And also I was going to have to at least make it look as good as possible because I don't want to embarrass myself. So it's like, let's do a Horowitz thing instead. He's local to Tampa, and he was down for it, but COVID.
Man. Boy, that would have been fun. I know, man. So much stuff this year changed because of that.
I know.
Yeah.
Just in the wrestling world alone. All right, Larson, come on. Give me your guys.
This is what I got. I got a few names. I don't got all six. I got Paul Lee. I know you said Talk to Chop Mania 2.
He worked his ass off at Talk to Chop Mania 2.
That was
but they were
great.
making fun of his footwork. So that's what I put him on.
Yeah, they totally were. It was that was the funniest bit. Is like, is that even a headlock? Look at where his feet is.
Yes.
Tokyo Pimp. Yujiro Takahashi.
That's good. I like it.
And then Tama Tonga and Tonga Loa is super tall brother.
Oh.
And then Superfly. That's who I got.
Those are good answers. Those are good
they
answers. All right. Anyways, that's going to do it for Matt Chat. Sean, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much,
really
Sean.
Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you guys. Anytime you want me on, I'd be happy to. I always like doing stuff with you guys, even if it's just mercilessly defeating you guys at wrestling quiz games.
How many of those victories do you hold at this point? How many times have you successfully defended and won?
I've won 4. I don't know how many times I've defended. They have like a Quizlemania wiki.
That's not
surprising. I think. Yeah, and
Wow.
I mean they're huge, obviously, but I've won it 4 different times, and then I feel like I defended it a couple of times through.
Are you at all shook now with the emergence of Tempest?
I mean, honestly, I was a little bit concerned about him prior. I knew that he would be good. I mean, even beyond his knowledge for his age. I mean, he's been fact checking literally everything, and he's been sitting in on all these episodes, so he's ingested a lot more knowledge. Mine largely comes from the fact that I have watched every minute of nationally televised wrestling TV for 30 years, and I keep up the resources section at Fightful.com. So if like there are any major tournaments or something, I have manually input that into Fightful.com, so that usually helps. But Tempest, man, he's a prodigy.
Oh,
that G1 bit, the last episode was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen.
Though, like the month before, I had just done our all-time G1 winners list. I've gotten lucky like that multiple times. Like they did one about movies. Well, on Tuesdays, we got a couple guys that do movie reviews about wrestling movies every single week. So I've gotten very lucky with a lot of those.
I felt less bad at that point. When I saw you guys doing that, I was like, well, clearly I don't belong. So I'm going to embrace my role as court jester. Maybe they'll need that more often. Totally happy doing that. There was always, we were talking about this before, on every celebrity game show in the 70s and 80s, there was always one guy who was really funny and really terrible, and they always brought him back, and I was like, that could be this guy.
Yeah. I love doing those.
Totally okay with that. Anyways, thanks all the friendos as well for sending in all your video questions again at the Patreon, patreon.com/Steve and Larson. You can send in your video question at the $20 mark. So thanks everybody for watching. We appreciate it. Till next time, we'll talk to you later.
Goodbye.